Hey friends, welcome back to the Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Sally Allen. And today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. Your resume and your talent gets you in the door, but emotional intelligence keeps you in the business and it also helps with your promotion. It is so key to understand when to speak, when not to speak, and to be self-aware and socially aware. So when I was 6 years old, I used to go everywhere with my mom. And one of the places where I learned emotional intelligence was at the bar. Mom tend to have one too many to drink. And I would sit there and I would observe. And one of the things I would observe is how much she's had to drink, but also the people around her. Who's had too many? Who's an angry drunk? Who's a happy drunk? And I would read them and I would make sure I navigate the room with my mom so that she stares away from those people. And I would also know when it's time to ask her, hey, mom, let's go home. I know there was a threshold where she won't go. So before we get to that threshold, I would make sure that I'm talking to her. I also know when to stay quiet and when to speak up. And so later in life, I also got married to someone who liked one too many drinks. And I learned some different awareness with that relationship. When I learned to walk, I can tell from a distance away how much he's had to drink. I can tell how much danger I'm in based on the way the key the lock turns in the door, or the footsteps that comes up the stairs. I can learn just the tone of the voice. And so I was reading that person again to make sure I'm staying away from danger, to make sure that I speak when I can and stay quiet when I should. And so over the years, building those skill sets, I didn't know I was building. It was emotional intelligence in the work. I did not know that. I was in survival mode. And so years later, when I was in corporate America, it really worked to my advantage. I know exactly when to go ask my boss to send me to get training to be a coach and a leadership trainer. I knew exactly when to ask when I saw there was a hole and a gap in the business. Hey, we need a mentoring program. I know exactly when to ask to train and coach leaders. And I knew when to go and ask for what I want because I was reading the room. I was reading the people I worked with. I was reading my boss. And I knew time and place, which is so important to be self-aware about time and place. It's very crucial. So I urge you, when you've walked in the door, know that your talent and your resume has gotten you there. But you have to build emotional intelligence. If you haven't read Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, I urge you to read it. But the skill set that you need to learn are: 1, self-awareness. You cannot regulate what you fail to notice. You have to be aware of how you are reacting. What's triggering you? What's setting you off? Where does someone has the power over you and what they say and what they do? You have to be self-aware and regulate your emotion. That would be the most important thing that you would do. 2, learn social awareness, how to read the room. When you walk into a room, understand what the temperature is in that room. I remember one time I was in a meeting at church and we were in a very prayerful state and someone walked in, just flung open the door and say, hey, I had the best taco for lunch. And we were startled looking at that person, didn't bother to read the room or just walking quietly and see, oh, they are in this room in a prayerful manner. I should wait until they get out of that state. But there are other meetings I've walked in and people are saying things and I'm looking like, did you just say that? I'm sure you've experienced that. So social awareness is important, when to speak up and when to stop. Understanding when the temperature is raising in that room and you need to stop. The next one is discernment in timing. I talked a little bit about this. Not every thought deserves airtime. I have to repeat that. Not every thought deserves airtime. There are some things you can keep to yourself. I know people have said, well, I speak what's on my mind. You know what? I hate to say it like this, but let me break it to you. That's pretty stupid. You have to know when to speak and when to stay quiet and what to say in what environment. Every thought does not deserve airtime. Understanding when to speak up would be the key to your growth and development. So, add value, not volume. So when you're leading people, emotional intelligence is very important. Understanding how to read your staff, understanding how to read when someone's going through something. I remember one time I was in a meeting and there was a woman in there and she looked like she's about to cry and nobody bothered to ask her what's going on. Now, after the meeting, I reached out to her and I said, are you all right? Her husband had just passed away the day before, and he just dropped dead. And she had told her bosses about it, but she's still in that meeting. That's another story. I don't even know what she was doing there. But nobody stopped to ask her, "Are you okay?" I know if you don't have the self-awareness to notice that somebody's going through something hard, you can't stop to ask, "Are you okay?" So if you're building a high-performing team, I highly recommend that you build emotional intelligence. And in the next episode, I will go through a little bit more, deep dive a little bit more on how to build emotional intelligence. Hey, if this episode sparked anything within you, please remember to like, share, and download. And remember what I always say, if you change your mindset, you can change your life. Have an amazing day until I see you in the next episode.